Alright. Abandoned railway it is. Train spotting. Bartek wants to show us the most picturesque spot in the area, said Anya. Maybe that's not the right word, he said, frowning. Well, it's not like it's that beautiful, but it has, an atmosphere, a climate. Ambience? Ambience? Anya said it at the same moment as I, and we laughed. Ambience. Bartek smiled, visibly relieved. I meant ambience. We ended up on some abandoned tracks. We soon left the village behind and ended up on some abandoned railway tracks. So this is where the magic happens? I grinned, pointing at empty bottles and used condoms strewn along the tracks. But with the slow winding river, a stone's throw away and the long drooping branches of the old trees shading the unused railway, that place really was picturesque. The bees buzzed around us, the birds sang like there was no tomorrow, and the fragrance of herbs hung thick in the air. My head was spinning. A perfect moment for a cold beer. Look what I got for us. I reached into my backpack and proudly presented the cold beers I'd bought in the store. The first sip was divine, as always. We were in a great mood. So, what do you do for fun in your neck of the woods? I teased Bartek. My friend has an ancient Fiat, so sometimes we hotbox it. He shot me an embarrassed smile. And then we start driving around the forest. But why? Anya threw her hands in the air. There's not much else to do, Bartek shrugged. When we entered the dense copse, we noticed a woman standing among the trees. It was Lisa. Hello, Bartek, she said. How did you get there? How did you get here so fast? I couldn't help but ask. There are shortcuts. She didn't elaborate. Hello, Elizabeta Danilovna, answered Bartek. I could hear something in his voice. Was it fear? Respect? Anger? I couldn't place it. She smiled. Do you mind if I join you? She asked. I noticed Bartek getting tense. So, what's the story with you two? I asked Bartek. She's from around here, he shook his head. But she helps with the protests. You know, Lisa turned to me. The protests against the logging that his father so eagerly promotes. Bartek winced and snapped, I guess. Sorry, shouldn't we coexist? Shouldn't we coexist with the forest? That means taking what we need to survive, just as everything does. 6,000 trucks of wood isn't taking what you need, kid. He threw me a glance, looking for help. I mean, you can't expect people to just ignore the way they've lived for centuries, I explained. This is their home and their land, and they're trying to make a living. If it was about local action, there wouldn't be a problem, Anya chimed in. But it isn't. Giant corporations are at work here with heavy machinery. Ask your friend about his father's money and his clients, Lisa shrugged. Bartek stormed away. I shrugged and followed him. Lisa followed me. We walked a narrow path. The path was too narrow for all of us to walk together, so at some point I found myself walking with Lisa. She would squat from time to time and collect some herbs. So you're looking for your roots, she said after a while. Why? Why was she asking? What's it to you? I asked back. I could use any help I can get, just as long as there's no strings attached. She laughed a throaty laugh. You're a smart one, aren't you? Sit down with me. She nestled among the roots of an old tree, reached into her basket and took out a blunt. Let's have a smoke and I'll tell you a story. She noticed when I hesitated. You need to hear it. I sat down. Tangled roots. Lisa let out a cloud of smoke and started talking. From what I learned from Bartek's grandma, you're asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. I was asking about my family, I pointed out. But not the right branch of the family, she said. Your grandfather wasn't from this village. This is a tainted land, girl, she continued. So much blood was spilled that Pusha almost lost her mind. Pusha was one of the words for forest. Polish had lots of those, but she used it in a weird way. Why do you call the forest Pusha? Isn't last the right word? I call her Pusha because it's her proper name, she huffed. Lass is to Pusha what dog is to a wolf. Domesticated, enslaved, used. Pusha is the primeval forest, one untouched by humans, primal, strong, and feared. There was admiration in her voice, and I realized that the words sounded like the rustle of leaves, like the wind. Pusha. So I was pronouncing that right as well. Nice. As I was telling you, Pusha almost went mad, and it's not wise to wake their spirits, especially not now. But I needed answers. What do you mean? I didn't understand. I need answers. She looked at me with those uncanny eyes. Her gaze was almost unbearable, hard, with anger smoldering somewhere deep within it, ready to jump at my throat, and then suddenly something changed. Lisa sighed heavily. You have no idea, do you? About what? What do you mean? I asked. So you have no idea who you are, she stated. Nobody told you what it was like here during the war and after it. Her eyes lost focus as though she was looking at something only she could see. In 1939, when the war broke out, first came the Germans and then the Russians. You know, they actually worked together. Stalin never forgot that he was beaten by the Poles in 1920. She shot me a glance. I nodded politely. I didn't really care, but I nodded politely. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter, really. She took a drag. Anyway, many millions of lives later, Stalin and Hitler stopped sleeping together, so to speak, and the Germans came. And then the Russians again, and then there were the forest soldiers. The forest part got my attention. I nodded so she would continue. They started as Polish soldiers, but then the war ended and they became guerrillas to fight the Russian occupation. And then they ended up as desperate bandits. She sighed. For the people who lived here, they were all the same. Germans, Russians, forest soldiers. They killed, they maimed, they tortured and burned villages. It didn't matter what language they spoke. How did you know? How do you know all that? I asked. My great-grandparents were from here, she sighed. After the war there were some changes and my whole family was sent to Siberia to die. My grandmother was the only one who survived. She met a Buyid shaman, and here I am. But your story is tangled with all of this. Oh, she looked straight at me. Have you ever wondered what your grandfather did during the war? Suddenly I felt dizzy. I wanted to answer, but suddenly I felt dizzy. The smoke from her joint smelled funny, of forest moss, strange herbs and ash and blood. I tried to stay focused. I focused and understood that the strange feeling came from within. It was like a long-forgotten dream, like an ancient memory suddenly brought to life. I let it in. We're sitting around the fire deep in the pushcha. The others are sleeping. I listen to the whisper of the leaves. The forest is speaking to me, demanding action. I find no joy in the task. I understand what has to be done, even if I find no joy in it. Soon I will wake the others and tell them the plan. Tomorrow we're going to burn a village. I sit by the fire and listen to wolves howling to the moon, weeping for their slain brothers and sisters. Then the vision ends. And that's why you don't do drugs, kids. When I came to my senses, Lisa was still looking at me. If I understood what you're saying, I looked at her. Something from my family's past casts a shadow on my future. She shrugged. I've told you everything I know. If you want more, talk to my girlfriend. We'll be at the logging site tomorrow. Yeah, good idea. I will, I said. Now I finally knew who and what to ask. There you are. Bartek waved to me. I thought I'd lost you. I said my goodbyes to Lisa and we went back. The bison statues were watching me with their creepy painted eyes, as though they knew me. Alright, old cemetery. Matters of the soul. So we have quite a few churches here, Bartek explained as we walked down the road. 2 Orthodox, 1 Catholic, and even 1 Baptist church, he said, as though it were something uncommon. Was there a synagogue? And a synagogue? I knew a part of my mum's family was Jewish. He shifted his weight uncomfortably. There aren't any Jews here anymore. Any Lutheran churches? Asked Anya. I don't think so. Bartek shook his head as he led us to a small wooden church surrounded by a cemetery. Anyway, even though we have all these churches, there's only 1 cemetery. The church was Orthodox, but the graves were a mishmash of styles and faiths, Catholic, Orthodox, atheist, everyone resting together. There's something poetic about it. That's a nice sentiment. There's something poetic about everyone meeting in the same place when they die. Bartek smiled. There is, isn't there? He looked at the cemetery, and for a moment he seemed lost in his thoughts. All of my family lies here, he said. I mean, the ones that are dead. Hey, what do you think? What do you think happens when you die? I didn't know. I don't really know, I laughed. I mean, I feel like there's something more, you know? But I don't think any religion really got it right. My mother raised me as an atheist, so I just try to live and have fun. Bartek nodded. I understand. Sometimes I'm not very sure either. He looked over the cemetery fence. Well, anyway, this is it. The spiritual heart of Białowieża. We can go see something else if you like. So that's where we stood. I wanted to go in, and he was clearly scared to let me enter the cemetery. I just went in. Not so fast. I wanted to look for my family here, remember? I smiled, opening the gate. Bartek shifted uncomfortably. I don't know if that's a good idea. He was hiding something. You found it. My family's grave. Maybe. So what are we waiting for? Anya smiled at him. He mumbled something and led us through the labyrinth of graves to the far end of the cemetery. The walkways were very narrow, and the whole place seemed quite chaotic. Catholic crosses, Orthodox crosses, no crosses at all. Huge statues and simple gravestones. Graves you couldn't see because of all the flowers, and graves that seemed completely forgotten. And then I saw the woman. Tall, broad-shouldered, and long-legged, with grey dreadlocks pinned to the crown of her head. She must have been in her late 40s or early 50s. She was marching through the walkways with fury in her eyes. Bartek quickly stepped between the graves to get out of her way. I didn't move. I didn't see any reason to move out of someone's way, so I didn't. Are you lost? Asked the woman in Polish, looking at me with surprising concern. Sure. Actually, I'm looking for an old grave, I said. My family lived here and... What's the name? Borodicz, I answered with a perfect Polish accent. She raised her eyebrows. I'm just coming back from there. Go to the end of here, turn left, and go to the far corner of the wall. She looked at me in a funny way. Why was she there? Why were you there? Is that your family? Did I have a 50-year-old aunt or cousin in Białowieża? My grandmother knew your family, it would seem, she answered. She always made a point of checking on their graves, so I'm upholding the tradition. When did you get so big on tradition? Bartek snapped. I think it was only then that she noticed him. Oh, it's you, she said with barely hidden disdain. Well, I'd better get going. See you around, I guess. With that, she left, followed by Bartek's hostile gaze. Who was that? I asked, watching the woman leave. Bartek winced. Oh, that's Olga. She's a local activist. She left Białowieża when she was 18 or something and returned a few years back with the notion that she was going to change this place. We continued to the far corner of the cemetery. There, seemingly forgotten and covered in moss, was a lonely grave. It was damaged. The tombstone was broken, deliberately. Someone had obviously smashed it with a hammer. The name was half erased. The plaque was also damaged. Someone had tried to scratch out the name, but the letters were still visible. There was a circle of coarse salt around the grave. I'm sorry, Bartek sighed. I didn't want you to see that. I looked around carefully. I looked at the scene. The circle around the grave was broken and the disturbed soil where someone had kicked the salt away was fresh. There was a patch of high grass behind the grave and I could see something glistening there. A rough wooden cross had been tossed into the grass. On it was a silver medallion with a strange figure or a wolf-headed saint. Something was written along the edges of the medallion, but the letters were too small to make out. Was Olga part of it? Olga was here just before us. She must have noticed the salt on the broken tombstone. Was she the one who broke the circle and tossed the cross away? Anya squatted and looked at the plaque. I can't read it. The letters are all wrong. She glanced at Bartek. Is it Russian? Belarusian. The same letters, different language, he explained. There were a lot of them here before the war. I looked at Bartek, hoping for some context. Bartek put his hands in his pockets. So, you don't know anything about your dad's side of the family? He asked me cautiously. Whatever happened at least 70 years ago, and someone still remembers. I showed him the medallion. Look what I found, I said, showing him the medallion. Does this explain anything? He looked at it carefully. It's St. Christopher, based on an old Orthodox icon, he said finally. He's the patron saint of a good death. He helps the dead move on. He squirmed. It's almost like someone believed there was a werewolf buried in here. He laughed uncomfortably. I looked at the grave. I looked at the grave for the last time. My family's name looked strange, written in the unfamiliar Belarusian letters. As we were leaving, I was thinking I was onto something. There was something unnatural about my family, and me coming to Białowieża had stirred some old demons. I just had to find out what my ancestors were doing there, who they were. With that thought, I left the cemetery. The day was hot and beautiful, yet I couldn't stop thinking about the devastated grave. We called it a day and went back. The first evening. The B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They looked like they needed some time alone to say their goodbyes. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back, smiling and a little flustered. What a day, she smiled. So what do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. Graveyard. What happened here that people are still vandalizing my family's grave? What did my grandfather do? She put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever it was, it's not your fault. It wasn't, but it could be my responsibility. I can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest on an UNESCO list or something? Yeah, no. I want to check out this protest people were talking about. Maybe you could go there tomorrow? Remember the shop? The tension seemed almost unnatural. A few words more and it would be a regular fight. Maybe they just envied Kim's style. Anya tried to joke, but she seemed worried. Something weird happened when I was talking with Lisa. I think it was her joint, but I saw some things. It looked like something from the past. Like, from your past? For a second I searched for words to explain it to her, but I couldn't really. I think it was my grandpa. It's hard to say, but it sure was weird. I shrugged, ending the topic. You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. Even though I was tired, sleep didn't come quickly. Anxiety was spreading its cold, writhing roots deep in my chest and stomach. I lay there for some time looking at the silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the weird vision I had that day. My roots were here. I could feel them, almost touch them, and they were reaching to me. I felt that the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I just had to go and see the logging protest, meet the right people and make them talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry. They slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds and colors. I drifted off. A night in the woods, by the way. Does this game autosave is the question. We've got an options menu. We can't save here. You know what? We're going to end the episode here before we get to the night in the woods. And I'm just gonna hope the game autosaved. If not, well, we've got a problem, but I still hope you enjoyed the beginning of Heart of the Forest. I'll see you guys next time.